Hey guys, Melissa here. How are you all? Let's see if I can talk this morning. I'm starting to get over my camera shyness, and it's taken a couple years to do that. So I'm so glad because I have so much to say. I was just watching Nate Drew's video about romance, and he does a great job about opening up. And you know what? I've looked at the comments and seen different comments, and I can say I also have been there. Um, I grew up in a family. There was prostitution, there was crime, there was everything you can think of. And I did have, I did have a situation where we started in, like when I was 5 or 6, we started in, over in Suncook, and it was very dumpy, very, very dumpy. On top of my grandmother who prostituted at times, who had like moved a zillion times into like dumpy places in Manchester. So I was always, dragged here and there and everywhere. And a lot of times I was visiting relatives or going on errands with my, grandmother. And some of my fondest memories are shopping with my grandmother and going to the strip, like the mall where there's just like a strip of stores over on Elm Street years ago. So there was a lot going on that I did not understand as a little girl. And I think my father, in his own way, tried to shield me from a lot of that. But yet, I think my mother, feeling like it was her obligation to honor her mother, did put up with a lot that she didn't have to. But this is my story, and I'm talking about me and how things affected me. So I kind of want to stick to that. So I had aunts and uncles, every single one of them divorced. I have one aunt who married 3 times back in the day when you didn't do this. An aunt from the country. I had city folks and I had country folks. So, being in Deerfield and walking the country roads and hanging out with my cousin was something that I loved to do. And the cows, in, watching the cows and haying and all that country foundation I also had. So I was around people all the time. And, that still motivates me. When I see a crowd somewhere on YouTube, that's like within the first 5 minutes, like I want to comment on the YouTube sections because I am motivated by a crowd. And I am an introvert, but I just get motivated by being around people to a certain point. So, growing up, we had moved into a small town that was, my dad was a construction worker, so he knew how to fix up this home, and the small town was a improvement. It was a level up. The schools were better. I didn't have to walk to school anymore, like a couple miles each morning. As a little girl, I didn't, with a group of our neighbors, so nothing happened to me. But I didn't have to do this anymore, and it was a very conservative town, small town talk. I'm glad that I was not part of that half the time because we were out doing errands with family in the city or going to people's houses. So we kind of made our own community. It wasn't that small town was my community at all. And so growing up, I saw a lot of fornication, and Nate talks about romance, and I've seen, it's called hooking up now, hooking up, but it's actually biblically called fornication. It's sex outside of marriage. So there was no real talk about sex, and I share about my abortion, my forced abortion, which comes into this because it's, how were you brought up? How were you raised to think about sex? And if you're going to have sex, you probably will fall into an abortion, most likely. So not knowing this, pretty innocent, good kid. I thought I was a pretty good person. I was, a good kid. I got along with most of the people in that type of lifestyle. I get along very well with them. And then pretty easygoing and stuff. And then, I had fallen into, let me see, I had my first boyfriend and it didn't work out because of the abortion. I shared that story. And then another boyfriend, and that was not healthy. He was a bad boy, big time, broke into our home and everything. And so this was like all a learning experience for me at 16 and then 17. And then I dated the guy that I've known since second grade, and we broke up a couple times. And the last time we had broken up, I mean, we broke up the first time for like a few months, and then we were right back together, no problem. I went off to college. He didn't think it was working. And then we lived together, which that in of itself is not a good idea. I know people will say, oh, live together and then you'll know whether you get along. It's not a good idea. There's a certain survey that says if you live together first, usually your marriage will not last. So then he broke up with me again, and this time because we had already lived together, it really was painful for me, very painful, because I had already, come from my first boyfriend thinking that I would marry him, and that whole thing was broken up because of an unplanned pregnancy. And then, kind of looking for love in all the wrong places. I was trying to have a relationship, although validation can come into that of feeling loved or romanced. You're trying, you have no guide, you're trying to figure out, like Nate Drew was saying, you're trying to figure things out and you're like totally lost. And it is like a bag of potato chips where you're eating when you're having sex without relationship. You're eating so that you're getting like no nutrition, basically. Same thing. So it's like sand in your mouth. So, I had broken relationship, trying to get back on my feet with relationship. And then the last breakup was just, whew, I don't care anymore. Nothing's working. And, then you end up, those relationships get more destructive. It turns into, a one night stand, or it turns into very short term relationships. So, there were a few of those, and then we had gotten back together, and that, thinking, okay, marriage is the answer, that will just be like a band-aid on everything. And then the first year of my marriage, I left. There was a huge fight. I don't even remember what it was. I was being chased, and then as soon as he got me the first year of marriage, there was nothing. And that being incompatible, it was just not working. So for my view of marriage, when I went into it was just a piece of paper, and if it didn't work out, oh well, just get a divorce. So I was on my way out the door. I thought for sure divorce was going to be what happens. I had my heart set on divorce in the end because he hurt me again. So I didn't have any skills for marriage or nothing. I had seen one divorce after another with 5 of my, uncles and my aunts, and my favorite aunt with lots of boyfriends and all this garbage around me. And my grandparents had their marriage and all. So marriage meant absolutely nothing to me pretty much when I got married. It was just a piece of paper. So from there, I'm just sharing this to hopefully help others not fall into this. So, when I became a Christian is what this is about too. Like Nate was saying, he's not a religious man. I was not brought up, to know Christ. I had religion as far as a grandmother who lived one way with prostitution, but was a Catholic in another way, and an unpracticing Catholic, so to say. Like we would go to the church and play bingo, and that was about all of my church experience with her. When I was a little girl, I did have a great aunt who talked about Jesus walking on the water. She was a Sunday school teacher, and I fell in love with him. My great uncle died, so I no longer saw them, and she was like the weird the weirdo. So we never kept in touch with her. And then there was like broken relationships, one after the other, from like my bike getting stolen as a little girl, to my rabbit dying, to anything that I got close to, just, broken. Or I didn't see an uncle because he was, doing cocaine, or I didn't see this guy anymore because my dad and him had a fight, or whatever, just constant brokenness. And that has a really profound effect on intimacy. And, working tons of jobs I did. And so when I had my firstborn son, we worked it out, and I thought, okay, this is going to be for good for now. So I had my firstborn son, and I had someone, my husband's grandmother, say, "What religion are you going to teach him?" And I actually said, "Religion? I am not religious. I'm not religious. Who knows?" So she said, "Well, why don't you just come visit, this church with me?" And I said, "Okay," and she didn't like the church first visit. And I'm like, "Well, I like it." I had no expectations of church. I really didn't even know what church was about. And I got back there. I took the stroller with my son, walked up there, was very worldly. And I heard the gospel. My eyes were open, and I got saved. So that's kind of my backstory. So I know what it's like to be in that hookup culture. I know what it's like. And I'm just, as an older woman now who's teaching young girls, hopefully, things, not only here, but going into schools. When I became a Christian, my whole life did a 180. 180. I realized how much I was loved by Christ, that at my lowest point of sharing that abortion, which I did before, he loved me. At my lowest point of feeling the worst I ever felt, I took all the blame for the abortion. Although it was forced, I took the blame, and I was at my lowest. And then the King of Kings comes and shows me how much he loves me. So it's not about religion, it's about faith in Christ. That's what happened. I actually was persecuted quite a bit by family after that. Like, my favorite uncle was like, "Oh my goodness, Melissa has religion now. Oh my goodness." And I had all this zeal without knowledge, going out telling everybody what just happened, which is not the wisest thing to do. But I was on cloud nine, and I grew in my Christian walk, and I did not have churches seeking me. I seeked the church. And so I just kept going. And this is how I changed my life, which anybody can do. I read a million books. I mean, there's so many books I read. I can't even tell you how many books I've read about Christianity and becoming, more Christ-like. And I just worked at it. I took all that hard work I knew, and I worked and worked and worked at it. And I worked at the theology, I worked at the practicality, apologetics, everything you can think of, as I was having my kids. And I worked at, the homeschooling. I read books after books with homeschooling, everything you can imagine, and turned my life around. So it was a lot of work, but I did it. And I cannot tell you, the rewards I have now are huge. From that foundational work has paid off, and investing in myself 100-fold. So I am where I am now today because of, giving church a shot and changing my life. And when you become a Christian, it is all God. That's why I'm here where I am today. It's God. I have a very good life. And, I am married now, and there's something about marriage that has a commitment now. Marriage is a commitment. And so when I just had, when things are tough, you got to try to just go to God with it and work it out. And if somebody leaves you, as I just had happen, then they left. And that's the reality, and there's nothing you can do. But you can do your part. You can say, okay, this is my part. If I'm divorced and that's what they want to do, that is what they want to do. But you can still be committed to the idea of marriage. And so, coming out from all of this, I just want to encourage anyone watching this, that anybody can do this. Anyone can. And it's falling in love with Christ, and that is your foundation. So I'm looking at the time, and I'm going over. 10 minutes is usually as long as I do. So just marriage is valuable. It is the way it's supposed to be. I was listening to Nate Drew, and you don't have to be religious to understand that marriage is the way it's supposed to be. And we're living in a culture where everything's hook up, and we have loneliness and we have a lot of destructiveness, and it really does affect, your happiness. And we're seeing babies being aborted left and right, and we're becoming a very, very sick society. So that's what I got for you now. And hopefully, if you have any questions about Christianity, you will come to, you will go to a church, check it out, and realize it's faith in Christ. That's everything. Thanks for joining me, guys.